Hello, everybody. It looks as if we have some folks logging in and we're giving everybody a second to be able to join us today, but we are at about 12:02, so we'll get started and hopefully folks will continue to join us and let us know who they are. Good afternoon. My name is Meg Stanley and I'm the Executive Director at Holspire. I'll be the moderator and facilitating this webinar today. On behalf of Holspire, I welcome you to Wisdom Wednesday. This is our last one of the year. Participating in Wisdom Wednesday webinars has been an opportunity for all of our participants to learn from leading experts on topics related to healthy eating, active living, advocacy, communications, and much more. Next slide. Healthy Blue is the official managed care organization of Holspire. And I'd also like to give a special thanks to two of our particular supporters that are supporting our advocacy efforts. Solving Hunger, an initiative from the Tusk Philanthropies, and also Sisters of Charity Foundation of South Carolina. Next slide. In today's webinar, we are going to be able to learn and talk about strategies to develop an advocacy agenda, the legislative focus for Holspire in 2024, and ways to become involved in advocacy. We want to hear from you, so if you have any questions at any time during the webinar, please use the Q&A, and we will try to answer all of your questions by the end of the webinar. And we thank you all for being with us today. Next slide. I have a couple of folks here with me today that are probably not they are familiar faces to you, I hope, because they're not strangers to Holspire. I'm joined today by Phil Ford, the founder of the Ford and Ford Group. He has over 20 years experience working on political and issues campaigns, including 3 years working full-time at Holspire before he started the Ford and Ford Group. He has also served on many boards of directors in the state and also trained advocates around the country on how to be good advocates and how to navigate the legislative processes. Phil is a longtime consultant with Holspire. He works with us as a lobbyist and also consults on various legislative issues and represents us at the State House and in our communities across the state. I'm also joined by Emily Mayer. Emily is a former school teacher and a fierce advocate for children working as the senior manager at the Ford and Ford Group. She specializes in collecting data and research and teaching other people how to be advocates in their communities. And I have just recently learned that she is even taking all of this personal knowledge that she has and is expanding it as a candidate herself for town council down in Bluffton County. Very proud of her for that. And then I will be presenting a portion today. And as I said, I'm the executive director of Holspire. And prior to joining Holspire, I had my career included stints in Washington and around South Carolina consulting for political and advocacy campaigns. Next slide. I wanted to start before we dive into really 2024 to review some of the accomplishments that took place in 2023. We really spent a lot of time as an organization and with partners to develop relationships with decision makers, especially in the House of Representatives, where we had over 30 new members elected during the 2022 elections, and there were so many new committee assignments. The goal was really to create a bipartisan support for healthy eating and active living strategies through developing personal relationships, providing data, educating legislators on the issues that were important to us, and really have consensus building. Holspire and our network of advocates provided testimony and data during hearings that created bipartisan support, especially for universal school meals. And we continue to meet with individual senators and representatives on this issue, as well as others that we feel are active strategies to promote HEAL work. We've also provided legislative staff data and information, and we've worked with a lot of partner organizations. Some of you are represented on the in the audience today to develop and deliver consistent information for legislators, as well as the media, which is the photo today was from a press conference in May with some partners. And at that, I'm going to hand it over to Phil to walk through and review a few of our legislative wins that we thought were wins in the State House during this year. Next slide.
Yeah, and I have to give a special shout out from that previous slide to Senator Katrina Shealy, who was our champion of this last session. She has been such a stalwart supporter of making sure kids across the state have access to healthy meals. And also a shout out to our friend who has joined us today from her office, Mason Thomas. So thank you both for supporting the work to make sure folks have access to healthy meals. So following a successful 2022 legislative year where we passed a bill to prohibit school meal debt going to debt collectors, we set our sights pretty high for 2023. And I'm proud to announce that we had five big wins across the legislative session from January through May. The first being, we had a great introduction from Senator Shealy, who pre-filed S-148, a universal school meals bill. And we worked very closely with Senator Shealy and her office to successfully get another 12 senators to sign on as co-sponsors, and we look forward to pushing this next session starting January 9th to get that bill across the finish line and make sure all kids are fed 2 meals while they're in school. The next bill was a bill from Representative Haddon up in Greenville that created a study committee to study the administration of certain food and nutrition programs, such as the school breakfast program, school lunch, local procurement of foods. And in that effort, we were able to make sure that universal school meals was included in that language, and to make sure that in an effort to increase equity and inclusion on that committee, to make sure that there would be parents of children who receive free or reduced meals would be a part of that committee. The next piece was, again, Senator Shealy coming in hot with us on Proviso 1.68 that agreed that students should get two meals at school. And we saw a huge increase of districts across the state that opted into providing free school meals. And I think there may be a poll question in just a little bit about how many kids across the state were affected because of that. The next win that we had, which was something that we have worked on since I was a full-time staffer at Holspire, was Healthy Bucks, the Healthy Bucks program, making sure that that program continues. And we've done a lot of work over the last several years to build relationships, not only in the legislature, but with departments across the state. In this specific instance, it was the Department of Social Services, and we worked with them to make sure that the Healthy Bucks program would continue, and we secured with their request of $5 million in the state budget. So we will see that program continue for years to come. And you know, legislation doesn't happen overnight. For example, I think this is 5 years coming that we've been working on Healthy Bucks. For example, the seatbelt law in South Carolina took 7 years to pass. So something that we think is just so important, right? It can take time. So that's why advocacy is so important, and consistent advocacy is so important. And then the last piece of this is the SNAP computer system. We know that we have an outdated SNAP computer system, and we advocated with DSS request to make sure that the first of 3 installments was included in the state budget to the tune of $8.7 million. So we're looking at over $13.5 million invested this year because of all of you on this call, because of the advocates who took action, and because we were at the State House every single day during session fighting for healthy food access and active living through the legislature. I think we have some poll questions up. Have you ever visited the South Carolina State House? And have you ever talked with your representative or senator?
And we'll have folks vote on that poll, while then we can be able, that will probably help us guide some of our discussion as we think about going and looking at some best practices in real life application. And if Phil is ready for the next slide, we'll have JC forward that for us.
Yes. So with advocating at the State House, there are some things that we want to just make sure that everybody knows kind of the best practices of what to do, how to do it. And then I'll pass it off to Emily to talk about how she's done it while she was a school teacher, and now luckily with the Ford and Ford group. I have to give a plug here. She's like my neck at the Ford and Ford group, making sure my head turns the right way when it needs to. But next slide, please. So the first step is, we know that it can be confusing with all of the different levels of government, that you're talking to the right person, right? At Holspire, we advocate at the state and local level. So it's really important that you're talking to the right person. Instead of talking to someone at the federal level, making sure that you're talking to someone at the state level when we're talking about, healthy bucks or universal school meals. A way to do that is to go to sestatehouse.gov /legislator search, and you just have to put your address in the system, and it sends you who your representatives are. The next piece is consistency. It's very important to share what's happening on the ground with legislators. Legislators see hundreds, sometimes thousands of bills across their desk every session. And it's important to have consistent communication with them to make sure that they can feel what's happening. In Columbia, it's difficult for legislators because they spend so much time advocating for issues that they're pulled away 3 days a week from their community, right? The second is making sure that it's a two-way street, that communication, that you're always not just asking for something from the legislator, that you are supporting them with information, that sometimes you post on social media that you had a meeting with a legislator. There's nothing more important than making sure that folks in their districts and their communities know that that they're doing the work of their community. The next is building a relationship. I'm so grateful with my time spent over the last 20 years that I'm proud to call a lot of the legislators now friends, and making sure that, it's like a relationship of any kind. Making sure you check in on people it is a really important piece. I never go into a meeting without a specific ask, right? I don't go in and just say, hey, the food insecurity rate in South Carolina, and it's ranged the last couple of years, is 1 in 5 among children under 18. That's great information, but what are we going to do about it, right? Making sure to include that ask to say, we've got a way to address that, and that is through universal school meals. And then following up with folks, whether there is, just a thank you, or if there's a question that is asked that you may not have the exact answer right away. Never answer the question if you are unsure. Say, you know what, I'm not sure, and I will get back to you. And follow up within 24 hours if you can, if you have the information at that point. The tone of the meeting is very important as well. Going in, because it's not uncommon for legislators and advocates to not necessarily agree on issues, but it's important to make sure to still be grateful that they gave you time, because like I said, they're busy folks. And you don't necessarily want to create an unnecessary object in your way to getting your bill passed or getting your legislation passed. So making sure to be respectful, especially in this time in the United States where we see a lot of vitriolic conversation, it's important to make sure to remain respectful and appreciative in these meetings. Like I said, always thank them. In particular, I have to throw out, always thank their staff as well, because, you know, if that's typically how your meeting is scheduled, right? Is through staff. And if you aren't nice to staff, you're not going to get that meeting. So it's very important to thank everybody throughout the process. And then this is probably the most important thing on the list. Make sure that you remember that the meeting is not over until you leave the lobby or the building, because in South Carolina, as we know, there are a lot of folks who are related to other people, and at the State House, it's no different, that there may be a niece or a daughter of an elected official that works up there. So make sure that you are respectful and remain professional throughout the process. And then I will pass it off to Emily. Next slide.
I'm so sorry. My dog decided to start barking right in that moment, so I apologize. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the relationship that I've been able to build with my elected official. I know there's going to be a part 2 to this session where you are instructed about the differences between lobbying and advocacy. I think it's really important to note that I am not a lobbyist, but I get to do a lot of advocacy through the work that I do. So my situation is pretty unique, but I want everyone to be able to try to replicate it in their own communities. So I'm going to share a little bit about that, and then I'll give you some tips. But first and foremost, I started my relationship with my elected officials online, actually. They were actively posting on social media, and that's how I began engaging with them. My state senator was really responsive in that, and we were able to have some conversations both in the public forum, but also through personal messaging to share information and really start to build our relationship that way. So then when I went to the State House for the very first time for testimony, I sent him a message and let him know that I would be there. Even though it was not his subcommittee hearing to attend, he still chose to show up and listen, which I really appreciated. He knew that I came all the way from Bluffton. He knows what kind of trip that is. So he took the extra time to hear me out, hear what I had to say to the subcommittee, even though he didn't have a vote there. And then he came to find me afterwards to discuss it. He thanked me for my time, and it opened up the opportunity for us to go visit him in the state Senate later on that day. I was able to connect him with another local advocate who had a little bit more information on the topic. And we were able to kind of follow up and have that touch point. But because of that, that opened the door to make advocacy a full-time thing for me. And I kept showing up at the State House more and more frequently. Every time I went, I always made sure to just give him a hello. Hey, Senator, how are you? Good to see you. I'm here today. Even if there wasn't necessarily something on the agenda that had to do with what I was there to advocate on behalf of, or I didn't have a hard ask for him in that moment, just to build that recognition between each other, because legislators see a lot of people over the course of their day. And just because I'm a constituent, I wasn't going to make the assumption that he knew who I was or remembered our previous conversations. But slowly over time, you could start to see, he would start to catch me in the lobby and be like, hey, Emily, how are you doing? So it was really, really nice to kind of see that relationship evolve. And now we have, honestly, a really positive relationship. whenever he's in district and has the availability, we sit down, we grab coffee together, we catch up. We talk about a wide variety of things that I'm advocating for, things that he sees coming down the pike, and find a way to strategize together. And that way it makes it easier for me to turn around when I have these hard asks to be able to say, hey, when we talked last month at coffee, we talked about XYZ. Now I have a hard ask that comes along with that. So I'm really fortunate to have a really positive relationship with my elected official. I know that that's not the case with everybody, but hopefully between my story and the tips that I'm about to give you on the next slide, you're able to start to build that positive relationship yourself. Oh, here's a poll question. Do you feel like you have a positive relationship with your lawmakers? Okay, cool. Mixed bag, but more yes than no's. We like to see that. Thankfully, with the issues that we advocate for here at Holspire, it's really easy to have a more positive relationship, right? We all want what's best for kids. It's easy to bring that to the forefront of the conversation. So I'm glad that you're seeing that reflected in your relationships. So when you're advocating within your district, know that there is no magic formula. But these are things that I have done. This is what helped kind of pave my way in the world of advocacy. And hopefully this will help you on your way as well. Write a letter to the editor in your local paper. It helps the public know what's going on at the State House because not everybody knows, or sometimes they don't even know that they need to care until we tell them. So writing that letter to the editor not only informs your neighbors, but also lets your legislators know, hey, I'm a constituent, I'm knowledgeable about this information and this issue. So when you see my name pop up in your email, on your voicemail, don't be so surprised to hear that I'm calling you. When there's an opportunity to provide written testimony, this is especially important for those of us who are not based in the Columbia area and can't always make the trip to the State House during subcommittee hearings. You can submit written testimony. There are emails that are provided in the agendas for the meetings. We can communicate that information out to you, and you can submit your written testimony that way. I always, when I submit my written testimony, not only send it to the staffer that heads that committee, but also to my elected official, especially if my elected official sits on that committee as well. That way they're getting that more personal touch point from me also. Don't be afraid to contact them. That could look like talking to them on social media, calling their office, visiting their in-district office. The more consistent that you are, as Phil said, the more they know that they can rely on you about that. When you have the opportunity, show up at the State House, make those face-to-face touch points where you can. It's easier to build that two-way relationship when your elected official knows that you are putting in the time and energy to be there at the State House with them. When you have the ability, meet within district. Bring other constituents with you if you know that there are other people who care about the issue that you're talking about. So it's not just you always doing the heavy lifting. Slowly and surely we can bring other people into the fold and make lighter work for all of us. This is a big one. Praise publicly, critique privately. It is quite highly possible, actually, it's definitely going to happen, that your elected official is not going to do everything you want them to do when you ask them to do it. That's part of the strategy that is government that Phil has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But when they do the things that you've asked them to do, or they take the extra time and the extra resources to meet with you or give you support, make sure that other people know about that. It makes it more likely for them to do it in the future. It builds that positive relationship between you. And lets other people know that they can get involved and that their efforts will not be in vain. And then critique privately. You can send a personal text if you're at that level with your elected official, or a personal email and say, I was really disappointed that you weren't able to vote this way on this bill today, or I was really disappointed to see that this didn't get discussed in committee when we had a conversation and I thought that it would. It allows for your relationship to, one, stay real, right? Because you are going to have those points of contact, of conflict with your elected official, but it also allows for them to know that you're working in good faith and not trying to undermine the process. And then lastly, most importantly, follow up, whether that is via email, at the State House, face-to-face in-district meeting, if you have their phone number, via a phone call. That way they know that you're doing the work needed to make sure that they can do the work they need to do. So if you have information that you promised you're going to provide, make sure you do that. Even if you don't have information to provide, just as a thank you, as a, hey, let's keep this conversation going, keep your foot in that door and don't ever give them a reason to slam it shut. And then that way we can continue moving forward, advocating for all of our good purposes. Next slide.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing that, because that is so important with what Emily was sharing about really taking time to develop that relationship before you have an ask, because then they know you're going to provide credible resources. And because, you know, not many of us respond well to someone walking straight in the door and asking for something right away. So it is good when you have that opportunity, and to remember that, you know, if you're their constituent, that's great. And that you can, ultimately, I mean, you are their voter. They want to hear from you. And that's just really important. I'm going to go ahead and this is a good time to pause. Kate has a question about when it comes to writing letters to local editors and submitting written testimonies. Do you have examples of this type of document? And I know it's important to be clear and straightforward. Yes, and that is very good point, Kate, especially when answering responding in a letter to the editor is look at what the guidelines are for that particular news outlet, because they mean it. If you go over, they're not going to take it. And the more succinct that you can be in that, it's very important. And that really goes similarly to in testimony. There are several hearings that I know Phil and Emily and I have all testified before where they have strict time limits. Honor that time limit, because they will even have a buzzer in that hearing, but we're able to provide written testimony to go along with that. And then that way we can be a little bit more extensive with it and then include data points. But if anybody else has some questions for us, we're going to keep going, but please put them in the Q&A and we'll try to answer them at the end. We wanted to move on to really talk. Go ahead, Phil.
I just add one more thing. It is very important to be compelling, but it's also important to work with groups that are already kind of doing the work in that space, because, you know, 3 minutes isn't a lot of time. And that's typically the time frame that you have to speak at the State House. So making sure that you communicate before going with me or with Emily or with Meg to say, hey, this is my testimony. Please look over it, see what other points other people are hitting. And then if there are questions that honestly that we can ask a member of the committee to ask you for something that may not be in your testimony, we can make sure that question is asked on the record. So making sure that you communicate with the advocacy groups that are doing the work is really important. Sorry to jump in, Meg.
No, thank you for making that point, because that is where we're able to help facilitate and make certain that questions are answered, that they're asked, and that there's that coordinated effort. That's very important. Along with that fits under sort of bucket of the cohesive messaging that we want to deliver as a group supporting one particular issue. As we're fast approaching the end of 2023, we do have 2024 coming up, and this session, which is actually the second year of a 2-year legislative cycle coming up, we wanted to talk about how we as an organization go about selecting priorities. We really have to look at more than just what we're interested in. We have to consider what the legislative and political environment is at the time, the timing of the legislative session, which I just mentioned, we're in a second year of a 2-year cycle. And then there's other external factors and distractions. We have to look at the feasibility of what we're trying to promote, and also our capacity as an organization. That's what all of our organizational partners are doing. while we might be focusing on a statewide legislative agenda, one factor that we are having to consider right now is that January and February we are going to be in the midst of a media and political frenzy with the presidential primaries going on. We have to acknowledge that and know it. The media cycles will be really focusing in on that. Every member in the Senate and House of Representatives will be up for re-election in 2024. So they're fast awaiting to determine whether they're going to have competition or not. So, there's a lot of the members are concerned about their political alignments, and really even the primaries are going to be what their election is. Some of them may only have primaries and not general elections. So this is all things that we have to think about as we go into this specific year, because we know that the competition for time and attention, not only of the legislators, but of advocates and of the media, is going to be really limited and vital for successes. Next slide. So at no surprise, given where we are with the movement forward with universal school meals, this is one of our top priorities in the State House for the upcoming year. The momentum that was developed with this bipartisan support and the leadership and championship, as Phil mentioned, from Senator Katrina Shealy. We also have many partner organizations that are represented here on this call and elsewhere that, we really are moving this forward. And fortunately, we also have, to be honest, our capacity, I'm going to be perfectly honest, that our capacity is largely due to funding for this particular issue. As mentioned, Senator Shealy introduced it, and the bill S-148 currently is in the Senate Education Committee. Senator Hembry, who is the chair of that committee, has not given that bill a hearing yet, is why it has not moved forward. But that we are working with staff and committee members to have stakeholders testify over the summer and in the fall at the Joint Citizens and Legislative Committee, as well as the Child Hunger and School Nutrition Study Committee hearings. We really talked about universal school meals at those hearings, as well as physical activities in schools. And with this particular bill, one thing that we're waiting on to determine our next steps is an updated fiscal impact from the Department of Education. Once that is received, we believe that the Child Hunger and School Nutrition Study Committee will release their recommendations, and it may be as early as next week. So we're a little bit, we're all really antsy to receive those recommendations. As Phil mentioned before, it was the proviso and this huge increase in participation in federally reimbursed programs that is impacting that fiscal impact report. So it is changed drastically from this time last year, and that is in favor of advancing the bill. We believe that all of this information is going to really shape the path of the legislation. So you're going to be seeing a lot more from Holzfire and our partners in social media that will be able to provide you direct options and opportunities for taking action. And we will ask you to please do that and follow us on social media. And also when there's opportunities arise to have that direct communication with your legislators and do what Emily was doing, we really would want you to do that and are here to help you with that effort. The next thing that we had mentioned is that also for last year, where Department of Social Services was able to receive their first installment. There will be additional funding needed for the SNAP computer system. We are really supporting Department of Social Services in this request to make all of the upgrades that are needed, because without them, distribution of benefits that are needed are just going to face additional challenges. So there are several pieces of either budget ask or legislation that some of our partners are at full capacity to support, and we're there for them, but we're backing it up to making sure that the infrastructure is in place to support these other programs as well. And as DSS, we're going to remain in communication with DSS, because if some other items come up, we'll be able to consider those as well. And we have on here the recreational trails bill, House 3121. As some of you who follow us and are friends at the Trails Coalition may be familiar with it. This was introduced several years ago and has had some momentum at the end of the session in the spring. And it is a House bill that has passed the House and is in the Senate Finance Committee now. It would provide incentives in the form of tax credit to landowners to put trail easements on their properties. And this bill is in an effort to be able to increase access to physical activity for people in various communities across the state. We are going to be able to monitor many other bills. A couple of them that we put up here is with the physical activities in schools and increasing it. That has been a part of 3731, as well as mentioned in other bills where we work with the various folks in the education educators and are very supportive of that, and be watching it to see what the timing of it for potentially moving forward will be. We also are supportive of various bills or potential bills surrounded about that have to do with trail access, and not just trail access in the woods, but trail access in urban areas that really serve as active transportation. This is tied to some of the work that we're doing that falls under the umbrella of the built environment, and working with planners and to really be able to consider equity and health when planning our communities. So we really have been able to give quite a bit of support through a collaboration to efforts in towns and with the state, and are working with DOT on ways to be able to improve that access. Next slide. So 2 things. If you don't do anything else, use your phone. You probably, if you're not already on your phone, if you're on your computer, pick up your phone, scan the QR code. It will take you straight to becoming an advocate, so that you will receive those alerts and being able to take action. We really try to reserve those, we're not going to bombard you. We really reserve it for, here's a time to take action. We're going to make it as simple as possible with as few clicks as possible for you to participate in advocacy. We also, we're going to put, I believe, in the chat, and if not, we will send it out in our follow-up email, a link to be able to take action and let your legislator know that you do support universal school meals. Next slide. So at this, we're going to be able to open it up. I don't see any questions in the Q&A right now, but we do have a poll, and we would like to know that if after this session today, if you plan to be able to engage in advocacy. And you can answer the poll, but then also if you would like to ask us a question, please do, or put it in either in the Q&A or the chat. And also, if you have questions after this, you can always follow us on social media, as well as send us direct emails. Oh, great, 100%. And at that, I believe we're at the last slide, JC, and we'll like to thank everyone for joining us today for a quick overview of where we are, where we see us going, especially early session in January. And please do also sign up for our newsletter, Whole Community. We will be able to post, more lengthy stories when an opportunity comes up to be able to visit the State House. Please do, and let us know that you're going. And love to, Phil and I have been there together, being able to host some of our advocates when they sporadically want to come and just check it out. Sometimes we've had people say, well, I just want to go check it out before I go to a hearing. And it's public, it's open. Go walk around, see where things are, become familiar with it. It's a beautiful place to visit as well. And also, please be on the lookout for some additional videos regarding advocacy and training. And part 2 of our Wednesday webinar advocacy focus will take place in February, and Wisdom Wednesdays will resume in January. Please be on the lookout and register for those, and continue to communicate with us. Thanks for joining us today.